Backed by consumption demand and government spending, we expect India's GDP to grow at 7.4% in fiscal year 18. While private final consumption expenditure is expected to grow at 8.9% in fiscal year 18, the government final consumption expenditure is expected to clock 9% growth in fiscal year 18. We are assuming a normal monsoon for the 2017, and on this assumption, we are expecting that agriculture would grow at 3%. Similarly, the industry is expected to grow at 6.1% and that of services 9.1%. Although GDP growth after bottoming out in fiscal year 13 has recovered, sustaining it in the medium to long term is becoming a challenge for the Indian economy, particularly due to non-revival of investment demand in the economy. In fact, backed by a good monsoon and 7th pay commission payout, it was expected that the overall GDP growth for fiscal year 17 will be very close to 8%. Our own estimate was 7.9%. However, the demonetization has adversely impacted the overall economic activity in fiscal year 17. As a result of that, now we are expecting that fiscal year 17 growth would be down to 6.8%, although CSO is putting it at 7.1%. In fact, one of the major challenges that the Indian economy is facing at this point of time is non-revival of investment cycle, despite various attempts or efforts made by the government. The way we look at the whole issue of non-revival of investment cycle is that the two major sectors which could have driven the investment or which could have revived the investment cycle are manufacturing sector and the infrastructure sector. The problem with the manufacturing sector is that manufacturing sector is still saddled with excess capacity. The capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector is stagnating around 70 to 75%. And also the manufacturing sector is not very sure whether the demand would pick up in the near term or not. As a result, they are not very keen to undertake fresh investment. On the other hand, if you look at the infrastructure sector, then in this sector there is a huge deficit and we badly need investment in this sector. However, most of the infrastructure companies which are kind of investing in this sector are saddled with bad debt. In fact, the infrastructure boom that took place in this country around fiscal year 11 onwards led to a situation where infrastructure companies invested heavily without commensurate return, because most of their projects got saddled because of policy paralysis. And as a result, what happened was that not only their balance sheet is under pressure, but because most of their debt was financed by the public sector banks, the public sector banks are also facing a huge amount of non-performing assets. So this twin problem of manufacturing sector not keen to invest and infrastructure sector wanted to invest but unable to invest because of huge debt in their balance sheet is leading to a situation where none of them are forthcoming for investment. Government on its own hand is trying to do its bit, and we have seen that in the last several of the budgets, governments have allocated huge amount of resources for infrastructure sector or for capex. But our view is that government investment alone will not be able to revive investment cycle in the economy. For that, private corporate sector investment has to kick in, and which is what is not happening at this point of time. Although firming up of global commodity prices, especially crude, is expected to exert pressure on inflation, our view is that wholesale price inflation will come in at 4.5% and retail inflation will come in at 4.2% in the fiscal year 18. We are also expecting a normal monsoon in 2017, and we expect this will keep the food inflation under check. However, we should not be too sure about it, simply because in the past we have seen that even when monsoon has been normal, there have been supply shocks for certain agricultural commodities. Such supply shocks cannot be ruled out for fiscal year 18, but nevertheless, we expect that normal monsoon would have a softening impact on overall food inflation. As a result of that, we expect that there will be a room for 25 basis point rate cut by RBI. Now, whether this rate cut will come towards the end of fiscal 17 or early fiscal 18 will actually depend on the assessment of RBI. But this is what we are expecting, that at best there will be at one more rate cut before the rate cycle comes to a halt. If this is the situation, then we are expecting the 10-year benchmark GSEC yield to trade in the range of 6.4 to 6.5% by March 2018. India is likely to face continued headwinds on the export front due to the play out of Brexit and anti-globalization stance of US President Donald Trump. And imports are unlikely to pick up so long as domestic investment cycle does not revive. As a result, we expect that the current account deficit will be about 1% of the GDP in fiscal year 18, as against 0.9% in fiscal year 17. We also hope that this will help the rupee to trade at an average rate of 69.18 per US dollar in fiscal year 18.